I'm going through a foreclosure. Can you help?
Sure, it's simple. We'll just leverage your transitory expenditures into a fiduciary trust, and we massage those assets before your money goes into my private account.
I don't get it.
If you're facing foreclosure, who should you trust? The Hope Hotline is a free resource connecting you with HUD-approved housing counseling agencies, available 24 hours a day, who can give you the information and
This is the Working Virginia Update. I'm Jesse Russell. One of the next battlegrounds for marriage equality is in Virginia, where 2 federal lawsuits are advancing in the legal process this week. From Richmond, Catherine Komp reports.
The 2 suits seek to invalidate the state's ban on same-sex marriage and civil unions, and its refusal to recognize legal marriages from other states. Reducing this inequality, says Nancy Wohlforth, founder of the AFL-CIO's Pride at Work initiative, will help working families across the state.
People who are able to get benefits for their entire family improves their life immensely, immediately, because they can cover their spouse and their children under a state employee's health plan.
Same-sex couples in Virginia are denied more than 1,000 other rights and benefits, including those concerning tax breaks, adoption, and perks given to military spouses.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
Who is stopping nearly 3 million kids in America from even talking to their parents?
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Today in America, 2.7 million children have a parent who is incarcerated, an experience that for kids can be as traumatic as divorce or even death. Prisoners, who often are housed hundreds of miles away from their families, can only stay connected with their kids by phone. But for-profit prison phone companies like Global Tellink, by charging sky-high rates $17 for a 15-minute call, make families choose between having enough to eat or money to pay the doctor or talking to dad. Why do companies do this? Because they can. Last August, the Federal Communications Commission capped the price for inmate calls at 25 cents per minute for interstate calls, that is, say, from Connecticut to New York or Massachusetts. A good step, but a small one, because most prisoners are serving time in their home state, and so the FCC edict doesn't help them or their families or their kids. Yet, the FCC can and should finish the job by capping in-state prison phone rates at a fair price. And there is a petition at the FCC urging the commission to do exactly that. So if you go online and sign the petition, almost 3 million kids in America will thank you.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union at aclu.org, because freedom can't defend itself.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown. Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty. Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. 22 U.S. senators are co-sponsoring the Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative aimed at revitalizing America's manufacturing industry to create more good jobs. Wisconsin U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin is one of them.
It's an initiative to bring together a bunch of really good ideas that will help strengthen manufacturing in America after decades, frankly, of erosion in that sector of our economy. I just believe you can't have an economy built to last that doesn't involve making things.
Baldwin says the initiative is a package of legislation designed to help American manufacturers grow and assist workers in getting the skills needed for the next generation of manufacturing jobs.
We've come together around 4 general themes that include focusing in on the workforce and preparing a 21st century advanced manufacturing workforce, opening markets abroad, creating the conditions necessary for growth, and expanding access to capital for manufacturers who might be able to initiate operations or expand.
The Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative has the support of the AFL-CIO, the National Association of Manufacturers, Ford Motor Company, the United Auto Workers, United Steel Workers, Dow, DuPont, General Electric, and the Blue-Green Alliance, among others. Verizon Wireless workers are seeking greater job protections in stalled contract negotiations. Jesse Russell reports.
Verizon Wireless workers walked off the job in Southern California on Tuesday over stalled contract negotiations. The workers, represented by the Communications Workers of America Local 9400, are unhappy with a company proposal that would see employee medical costs increase. The union is also requesting that Verizon set a limit to how many non-union contractors can be used for building projects, and to also restrict the outsourcing of call center jobs. The two sides have been in negotiations for 7 months, and a federal mediator was brought to the table on Monday.
Indonesia is the most recent country to see a national strike as tens of thousands of workers took to the streets on Wednesday. The workers were demanding a 50% wage increase, claiming the government has failed to accurately adjust the cost of living index. Workers Independent News will end November 15th unless listeners step up immediately to support this broadcast. If you value this newscast, go to laborradio.org right now and hit the donate button to keep this newscast on the air. Spread the word in social media and any other way you can. laborradio.org, hit the donate button to support us. After more than a decade, Workers Independent News will cease to exist November 15th unless emergency efforts to raise enough money to keep going are successful. Please spread the word and do all you can to support Workers Independent News. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Karl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Hello and welcome to Take Action News. All weekend, I'm Karl Frisch. You can find more about me at karlfrisch.com, and be sure to sign up for my email list and follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. Don't forget to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. Thanks to Danielle and Shano for the show's new intro music. Listen to their show, Talking Left with Danielle and Shano, online or at 1480 AM, We Act Radio in Washington, D.C. We've got Peter and Troy on the controls, and I want to give a special shout-out to our affiliate in Chicago, WCPT Chicago's Progressive Talk. Now let's get on with the news. It's been a bad couple of weeks for GOP race relations, long considered the parties of old white men. Comments made last week by North Carolina Republican Party official Don Yelton on The Daily Show proved that among this crowd, the, quote, "I'm not racist, but" argument is alive and well. Asif Manvi interviewed the now former North Carolina GOP official Yelton on his state's extreme voter ID law. But not to worry, Yelton insists the law isn't racist.
Bottom line is, the law is not racist.
Of course the law is not racist, and you're not racist.
Well, I've been called a bigot before. Let me tell you something. You don't look like me. But I think I've treated you the same as I would anybody else.
Right.
Matter of fact, one of my best friends is black.
So one of your best friends
One of my best friends
is black?
Yes.
Furthermore, Yelton seems blind to the legacy of black disenfranchisement in this country or his state.
All right. Then I found out the real reason for the law.
The law is going to kick the Democrats in the butt.
Wow! An executive GOP committee member just admitted that this law isn't designed to hurt black people, it's designed to hurt Democrats.
If it hurts a bunch of college kids that's too lazy to get up off their bohunkus and go get a photo ID, so be it.
Right.
If it hurts the whites, so be it. If it hurts a bunch of lazy blacks that wants the government to give them everything, so be it.
And it just so happens that a lot of those people vote Democrat.
Gee.
It seems that Yelton sees no problem with the law that, while only meant to hurt Democrats of all shapes and sizes, is predicted to have a hugely disproportionate effect on black voters. The interview prompted the state party to ask for Yelton's resignation. Buncombe County Young Democrats president Alex Fisher told MSNBC, quote, "Pretty much everyone locally knows he's a crackpot. He's always just been known to fly off the handle and say whatever ridiculously racist thing comes to mind." Over in Nevada, a state senator said this week that he would endorse slavery if that were the will of his constituents.
When I ran my first campaign, and the one I lost, I said the same thing, that I will do what my constituents want, end of discussion. And Chuck Muth wrote a thing saying, well, I guess this guy, he didn't know me at all, and he says, I guess this guy, if the citizens of District 39 want to bring slavery back, he'll run for slavery. So I wrote him a letter back and I said, yeah, I would. If that's what they want, I'd have to hold my nose, I'd have to bite my tongue, and they'd probably have to hold a gun to my head.
Funny. Mind you, he's not happy about the idea of reviving slavery, but he has little other choice than to honor his constituents' will, no matter how appalling or racist it might be. What these men have in common is a misunderstanding of practical racism. The idea that a government official can justify a policy by pleading lack of racist intent. In a nutshell, the law can be racist as long as you're not a racist. What's an old white man to do? It's comments like these that alienate non-white voters. Coupled with the GOP's stance on issues like abortion, gay rights, and the employment non-discrimination, it's no wonder that the party is becoming increasingly white, increasingly male, and increasingly old. Conservative strategist Ed Rollins suggested on Fox News in July of last year that the party should recruit more minority representation. He even suggested that Mitt Romney pick Marco Rubio as his running mate to appeal to Latino voters.
If Ed Rollins were sitting on the Mitt Romney team, who would you select?
I'd pick Rubio.
You would?
I'd pick Rubio. I think that would be a very exciting choice, and would certainly, we don't win Florida, we don't win the game.
Mm-hmm. So is that a way that you get away from what some people, when they critique the Republican Party, they say it's just a bunch of old white guys?
It is a bunch of old white guys, and unfortunately a lot of them are fat like me, like Haley Barbour, my former deputy, and others. We need to basically broaden the base. We need to have more women. We need to have more Latinos. We need to have more African Americans.
Absent substantive policy changes, this kind of tokenism will only get the GOP so far. In the lead up to the midterm elections this year, conservatives have embraced immigration reform out of electoral necessity. We'll be talking with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and filmmaker Jose Antonio Vargas about how U.S. demographic changes may be forcing the GOP's hand on immigration reform. Keeping with the theme of GOP denialism, we'll be joined in the second hour by Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color of Change, to discuss Senator Ted Cruz's insistence to Trayvon Martin's mother that the Stand Your Ground laws are not, in fact, racist. And later this hour, the nation's Ari Berman will come to the show to talk about his review of Gray May's Bending Toward Justice, a history of the fight for the Voting Rights Act. Up next, we'll be joined, as usual, by syndicated columnist Tina Dupuy to discuss her new piece, Iraq Makes Request for Weapons of Mass Destruction. It's not an article from The Onion. It's about the war on terror. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to the show. Take Action News here all weekend. I'm Karl Frisch. Joining us, as she does every week now, is Tina Dupuis, good friend of the show, syndicated columnist. Tina, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Karl. How are you?
I'm great. So I have to tell you, I fell for the title of your column, even though the lead says that it is not something that I'm reading in The Onion. The title of your column, Iraq Makes Request for Weapons. Of course, you follow that right up by saying, no, this is not The Onion. And I said, is it The Onion? Are you sure, Tina? But apparently it's not. They are asking us for weapons.
Yeah, in the New York Times, quite publicly. This was not something that Malaki did, behind closed doors. This is not, the Iran-Contra affair. This is like straight up in the New York Times. The Prime Minister of Iraq, who also happens to be the Minister of the Interior, Minister of Defense, and Minister of National Security Affairs, because he's a Renaissance man in a thriving democracy. He said that Iraq doesn't have a single jet fighter to protect its airspace.
That's good.
And so we, after spending $1 trillion building this nation, we now need to arm them sufficiently. And the issue with that, what I take umbrage with, is that it kind of seems like Malaki and is having a little bit of a bromance with Iran.
Well, let's get to that in a second. I want to just the optics here of placing this in the New York Times. Has this become the way that world leaders that communicate with the United States to place op-eds in major newspapers in America?
Yeah, it kind of does seem like the main plot device of a Madonna movie, just releasing Susan. It's I mean, I like it in one respect because it has kind of diplomacy out in the open. I think that Americans have a tendency to pay more attention to Kim Kardashian's butt than to anything that happens outside the borders of the U.S. And oftentimes, especially when we're talking about the Middle East, it is very, very complicated.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's unfortunately, I think more people have probably read Sinead O'Connor's open letter to Miley Cyrus than have read this op-ed. Hopefully, you can bring more light to it. So, part of me makes
when it comes to the Middle East, it's such an incredibly complicated issue.
Right. Well, and part of it, I mean, obviously, if they want arms, they know who to talk to in our government. Part of me is jumping to the conclusion that perhaps the reason they would place such an op-ed is so that the arms industry would know that they want arms and that they know who to then turn around and lobby.
That's really interesting. I mean, the arms dealers are always pro-arms, always arming. Anybody in a conflict, they're definitely not a peace lobby. That's an interesting point. I don't know so much about that as when the rhetoric that he used in this op-ed it sounded like it could have been written by George W. Bush
or Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, I'm surprised it didn't have.
Really did use.
Here in Iraq, we have known knowns and known unknowns and unknown unknowns. It didn't have that, but it was pretty darn close.
Right, but it talked about like security and terrorism and Al Qaeda. Like it kind of hit all the buzzwords that Americans are fully, are just used to. But definitely during the Bush administration was able to sell a war, ironically, to invade Iraq and to out Saddam Hussein. So it's kind of like this. Like if you go over these tired bromides, then maybe we'll go like, oh yeah, then definitely give these guys a couple of jet fighters. Got no helicopters, you poor thing.
Well, and meanwhile, you point out that it appears that al-Maliki is playing both sides, appealing to us for weapons, but at the same time perhaps helping Assad in Syria.
Right. And by just letting the Iranians use their airspace, there have been daily shipments to Syria, to Assad, which have been described as his lifeline, and how he's been able to stay afloat during these 2 years of this incredibly bloody civil war. And in the op-ed, he kind of talks about the war in Syria and says that he would like to see it resolved, but doesn't specify as to whose side he's on. There was a time when there was a real debate. Before we went the diplomatic means, there was a time when there was a real debate as to whether we would arm rebels in Syria because we wanted Assad out, and clearly Maliki is supporting Assad and his regime. So this is, again, like I said, it's very complicated. But what could make it worse is giving them militarized weapons.
Right.
That could be, a little bit. That could not make anything better.
Yeah, it's like, we know they didn't have any WMDs because we never found any, but maybe we should just give them some WMDs so they can turn around and use them on us. I mean, we've never armed anybody and seen those weapons used against us before, have we, Tina?
Oh, yeah, no, never. I mean, no American, and say Afghanistan, has ever been shot by American arms that we just so happened to give the Afghans during the 80s when they were fighting the Soviets.
Well, at least the arms dealers here in the U.S. had plenty of time to make money off of that situation before men and women started to die 20 years later.
Indeed. But yeah, what this op-ed really doesn't talk about is the relationship that Iraq now has with Iran. And there's been, and I wrote about this last week, there's kind of been this this kind of a PR love fest over the new president of Iran, Rouhani because he is a moderate, right? So there was even this kind of like glee that spread across the world that he allegedly acknowledged that the Holocaust happened, right?
Right.
So, kumbaya. And in fact, like if you look at the transcript, he was not that definitive about it. He would kind of waffled, but even
no, I mean he said I'm not a historian. I don't know.
Right.
It's progress.
It's not like, which is like right. I mean, it is progress, and coming from someone who said like it was all made up. That's like a step in the right direction. But but Rouhani is definitely an inside man. He's been a part of he was part of the revolution, and he's been part of Iran the entire time. It's not like he's this outsider. He's not an Obama. He's not a transformative figure. He's just a guy that seems a little less nuts than the last guy they had in there.
Right.
So we have very low standards for what seems to be a moderate in Iran. But he's been suffering from sanctions, his country has, and so there's this kind of like PR blitz to make him look like he's more reasonable, and that is yet to be seen by any of his the policies that he's been able to implement, or not in Iran. But there's tons of evidence that besides even banking interest, that Iraq has been able to help Iran skirt sanctions, and they're kind of like they're now in this kind of like weird bromance where they have been just helping each other out. It's not the reason why we get Iran and Iraq mixed up sometimes is not just because they have one letter off in their name. It's actually because they have a very suspiciously close relationship now. But we have again sunk all this money into Iraq, hoping that they would be our friend.
Well, and talk about that. I mean, one of the parts of your piece that I liked in particular is, one of the problems I've had since the Iraq War is that you turn on cable news or the Sunday talk shows that set the political debate in this country, and the same people who got it absolutely wrong about the Iraq War continue to be turned to for trusted sage advice on international relations. Bizarrely, I mean, it's like if you went to a doctor who said, I think your arm is infected and we're going to amputate it, and then they cut off the wrong arm, you wouldn't go back to that doctor for another surgery.
Asking for directions.
Right. So you talk a little bit about the cognitive dissonance that's going on here. Tell us about that.
Well, the cognitive dissonance, like once there's a disconfirmation or a failure of prediction, there is a lot of times a kind of doubling down phenomenon, right? Where if like someone says that the world's going to end on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday you go, no, now it's even sooner, and you kind of like use rationalization, and they found in a lot of these doomsday cults, people who study this stuff have found that people actually, there's an increase in proselytizing afterwards. And so we've kind of done this with Iraq, where it's like everything, all of our predictions, Greece's liberators, whatever, this is going to like, it's going to pay for itself because we're going to get all this oil. None of this stuff has actually come to fruition, and so now we kind of like have changed the parameters. Now we just want them to be friendly with us, like it's not like
please like us.
They didn't pay us back. They didn't like there's not an American love fest over there. Now we just want them just not to like burn our president in effigy. We have very low standards. But like it's just not panning out in what Iraq's doing as like a I'm using air quotes democratic.
Air quotes work great on the radio.
Yes.
Well, and it's like, oh come on, we'll love you if you arm us, and by the way, we're going to help Iran. I mean,
right, and be on whatever side they really want to be in Syria, which is not Americans, not in America's interest either.
So, and this is a kind of a case of the enemy of my friend is their friend, instead of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's just a little messed up. I mean, you liken it to.
Who I want to be my friend is actually the friends of my enemies.
Right. I mean, you basically say what's a fighter jet or two among frenemies.
Right.
I'd never thought of our country having frenemies, but. So, what do you think? Have you seen any reporting that indicates what the U.S. might do here?
No, and I've actually. This is, I'm surprised that this didn't make more headlines. I mean, when I was reading the New York Times and I saw this op-ed, and I was like, okay, this is just like gobsmacking. Just neon sign, bad idea, and because just from the human rights abuses that Malaki has showed, while he's been in power, and he has way too many jobs.
It's absolutely.
It's very
well. I mean, maybe he can have a few more. Tina Dupuy, syndicated columnist. Once again, an excellent read. Check it out at tinadupuy.com and follow her at Tina Dupuy on Facebook and Twitter. This is Take Action News, and we'll be back in just a minute.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor.
A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around. Stick it in the apple.
Colon cancer almost always starts with the polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh?
I didn't even see you guys there. Get the test, get the polyp.
I want to talk to my lawyer!
Get the cure.
I got a phone call!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. All weekend, I'm Karl Frisch. If you pay attention at all to the Supreme Court, like I do, you know that in the last term, sure, marriage equality kind of made some progress. But the Voting Rights Act, something that was hard fought, was basically gutted. And in a new book out recently, Bending Toward Justice, it was published in April, Gray May, the author, paints a picture of the fight to get the Voting Rights Act and where we're headed now. There's a great review of this book in The Nation, and I thought we'd bring on Ari Berman to talk about it. Ari, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Karl. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things that you kind of see happening in the Supreme Court right now, and then we'll get it a little bit deeper into the book, is, we know that the civil rights movement successes were, built on top of one another. It was incremental success, big court cases built on top of smaller court cases until we got where we are. Same thing with legislation. It was about getting, things moved along as far as possible over a long period of time. I get the sense now, looking at the decisions that have come down on affirmative action and the Voting Rights Act of late, that the conservatives know that if they were to strip these things down and, in one foul swoop, that they'd be seen as crackpots. So they're now systematically dismantling the progress of the civil rights movement piece by piece in kind of an incremental backwards sort of way. What do you think?
Well, they've been trying to dismantle the legacy of the civil rights movement pretty much since these laws were passed.
Right.
I mean, you had constitutional challenges to the Voting Rights Act in 1965, but they failed because you had, 8 or 9 members of the Supreme Court at that time who recognized the constitutionality of the act. And the same thing happened when the act was challenged subsequently. I mean, it was basically challenged every single decade. And every single decade it was affirmed. Now, what we see is we see the courts moved further and further to the right. First, you have Nixon appointees. Then you have Reagan appointees. Then you have Bush 1 appointees. Then you have Bush 2 appointees. And what happens is the judiciary moves further and further to the right. And then that happens on the Supreme Court level. And really the huge shift happens under George W. Bush, right?
Well, yeah, Roberts, right? Roberts was working he was a special assistant to the Attorney General in the Reagan years. And he kind of developed this whole plan to dismantle the civil rights movement.
Yeah, so I mean, Roberts, dating back to the Reagan years, like many in the Reagan administration, had this view that federal protections for historic discrimination are either no longer needed or need to be curtailed. And he tried to do that with the Voting Rights Act. He was overruled by Congress. Now he's in a position where he can't be overruled by Congress, or at least not very easily. So he has the power. And what happened was there was this big shift when Sam Alito replaced Sandra Day O'Connor. O'Connor was a moderate on a lot of things, including issues of race. And now you have basically 5 conservatives on the court who believe that these historic protections for discrimination are no longer needed. And that's how we have a situation where really the heart and soul of the Voting Rights Act was invalidated in June.
Well, and, one thing that comes to mind is how much, could have been a lot worse. I think a lot of people were expecting, Section 4, I believe, I could have that wrong, to be struck down in its entirety, but
Section 5 was struck down. So
right.
Here's what happened. Basically, Section 5 says to the states with the worst history of discrimination, largely in the South,
right,
they have to clear their voting changes with the federal government to prevent discrimination in the future. Now, this was a revolutionary tool. This was the most powerful thing the government had ever done to stop discrimination in any area, because now the burden of proof was on these jurisdictions that had done the discriminating to say to them, listen, if you're going to keep discriminating, we're just going to block these laws. And so that was not overruled. What was overruled was all the states that were subject to Section 5.
With the formula by which they were, included.
Exactly. So yes, Section 5 still theoretically exists, but no states apply to it.
Well, and the interesting thing was that
killing Section 4.
They basically kicked it to Congress and said, fix this, and then you can have your Voting Rights Act, knowing that Congress wasn't going to act. I mean, during the oral arguments, Justice Scalia said nobody in their right mind would vote against this, right? Basically, because it had passed in the Senate 98-0. By the way, that's what Scalia was confirmed on. But now nobody has to vote against it, right? Because the Supreme Court has done what the intellectual conservative movement wanted to do, but that nobody up for an election could possibly get away with. They've gutted this and made it so that a Congress that can't pass much of anything never has to look at it again.
Well, I don't think I'm not quite that cynical in the sense that I don't think the status quo is going to exist forever. I think there will be legislation to have a new Voting Rights Act. I'm not sure what will happen with that legislation. Obviously, the prospects aren't very good in this Congress, but the thing is it'll become an organizing tool. It'll become a long-term organizing tool, and this is going to be a long battle. I mean, clearly what's going to have to happen is the evidence of discrimination that we're seeing in states like Texas and North Carolina right now are going to really have to come center stage, and people are going to have to realize that the status quo isn't working when it comes to voting rights, that we still need those protections for these bad actors.
And that's to get it through Congress. I mean, so what people may not know is that the last time it was reaffirmed, the Voting Rights Act, during the Bush years, the painstaking nature of the investigation to determine whether or not the Voting Rights Act was still necessary was insane, given what Congress is capable of doing these days. It passed under a Republican Congress with a Republican president because of how detailed the discovery was to find out where is discrimination still happening. Do we have examples of it? Reams and reams of documents underscoring the examples of discrimination in our voting were turned up and hearings held all over the country. And yet that wasn't enough to convince these justices. Do you think that it might take more than just the evidence of what's happened since it's been gutted to sway the justices?
Well, what the justices seem most concerned about, the conservative justices, what they seem most concerned about was the idea that they were relying on old data, that basically these states were covered based on data from as late as 1972. And so Roberts basically seemed to say that he was open to some sort of fix, but it had to be based on more current information. But people don't know exactly how to interpret that decision. How recent, for example? The last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years. And remember, these states were covered because of 100 years or more of discrimination.
Right.
I mean, not to mention slavery and everything that happened before 1965. And so the question really is, can you just look at the last 10 years and figure out who to cover? Or do you have to have a lot more historical context to inform the states that really are the worst actors? Because, I mean, what you see throughout history is that the same places where there was slavery, where there was insane amounts of discrimination after Jim Crow, those are the same states that are discriminating today. I mean, yes, discrimination has spread in the context of voting to states like, for example, Ohio, Pennsylvania, who are trying to manipulate the vote for political purposes, but basically the core of discrimination is still happening in those states in the South. And so I don't really believe that they've changed enough to warrant being free to federal oversight.
Well, I mean, now they're going, and you can talk a little bit about this, we've got like 2 minutes left. Now there's this big push for nullification so that, notwithstanding, I mean, the lunacy of these laws that are being proposed where you'd have two different rules for voting, one for federal and one for state and local elections, is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, basically, so that stems from actually a different case that was before the Supreme Court, right before the Voting Rights Act case, where the Supreme Court basically said that there's a way that you register to vote through the National Voter Registration Act that doesn't require so-called proof of citizenship, which is on the books in Arizona and Kansas. And the Supreme Court basically said you have to allow people to register to vote using this federal form from the National Voter Registration Act. And the states of Congress of Kansas and Arizona basically said, okay, well, if people register that way but they don't show proof of citizenship, they just check a box that says I'm a citizen under penalty of perjury, which, by the way, has worked pretty well over the years. If they do that thing, then they can't vote in state and local elections. And so now you have a situation where thousands of people are registering to vote and might not be able to actually vote in so many major elections in these states. This is headed, I think, back to the courts. But I think it's a broader example of, well, when either the judiciary or the Congress pass laws that conservatives don't like, the conservatives just decide that they're going to ignore the laws altogether. Like we're seeing, for example, with health care. We've seen it in other areas as well. I think it's a very disturbing trend because obviously, I mean, these are laws that are on the books, and I mean, just to say you're not going to follow them, I mean, that's a very slippery slope.
Well, it's also hysterically not conservative. I mean, any look at the Constitution's text and history would show you that the founders wanted a robust and powerful federal government.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that there's always been this trade-off between the state power and the federal government's power, but I don't think anyone envisioned, for example, the Supreme Court making decisions, Congress making decisions, and the states just ignoring them. Also, it's worth mentioning, nullification was an ideology that really came about before the Civil War in South Carolina by John Calhoun, who was a really virulent segregationist. And I think the worry here is that a lot of the same people that are pushing nullification today are inspired by the Confederacy, by the ideology of nullification, and that there's some really ugly racial politics behind all of this.
Well, that's certainly true. Ari Berman, contributor writer for The Nation, thanks for joining us and chatting with us.
Thanks for having me, Karl.
You can find his work at thenation.com, and don't forget to follow him on Twitter and elsewhere at Ari Berman. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we come back. We're going to dig in a little bit on what it is to be a man. Stick around.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on healthcare while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, where you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend. So if you're like me, you have no idea that there is a men's rights movement. The masculine mystique, as this Daily Beast article calls it, is inside. It's a look inside the men's rights movement. And if you can stop laughing for just a minute, it's actually a serious thing. You've no doubt encountered them if you ever talk about feminism or issues related to feminism on the internet or elsewhere. And we wanted to chat about it with our good friend R. Todd Kelly, who's the managing editor of Ordinary Times, and he joins us now. R. Todd, hello.
Hello, Karl. Thank you very much for having me on.
All right. So this whole thing stems from, the 60s and 70s when, Billie Jean King was playing tennis against that guy. I can never remember his name. And people were really up in arms against women daring to say that they wanted equal treatment under the law. And it continues today. Tell us about it.
That's true. I would suggest, however, that it's evolved very much from what it used to be back in the 1970s into a different animal. The men's rights movement originally, not surprisingly, was a response, a blowback response to feminism in general in the 60s and 70s. In the 90s, it actually began to pick up a little bit of steam.
Thanks to Rush Limbaugh, maybe?
Thanks to Rush Limbaugh, but I also think that there's a significant amount in the 1990s of growth in the movement due to child custody issues. And the perception amongst a lot of men who'd been through divorce courts that custody was predisposed toward a mother rather than a father. But even that is very different from what the men's rights movement is today. The internet has actually allowed the men's rights movement to grow into something that is completely different and is actually perhaps best described as a confederacy of rather disjointed causes, which are really bound together as much by sort of an animosity towards feminism as actually a desire to campaign or fight for men's rights.
I'm familiar with Rush, using the word feminazi and everything else.
Right.
But, you talk about, whether it's spousal abuse or child custody or other things. We often see these people, going after victims of these things in the name of male rights. They'll drag a rape victim through the mud, for example.
That's absolutely true, and I think, one of the things that I think it's important to keep in mind when you're talking about the men's rights movement is that there are two separate things going on at the same time. There are actually a group of men that have concerns about what I believe, which I wouldn't have believed actually prior to my research from this story, but which I now believe are legitimate grievances that men, at least in American society, especially lower income and minority men, have, where unintended consequences of laws have sort of, in various cases, either victimized or reduced their civil rights. So there actually is there behind the men's rights movement. That being said, as I said before, a substantial amount of the movement, and certainly a great amount of its growth during the Internet period, doesn't come from those specific issues. It doesn't seem so much as hatred of feminism. There are a variety of instances where, sort of given the chance between stepping up to the plate and trying to produce some sort of working policy decisions that might help, say, for example, men who are victims of spousal abuse, whether the abusers be other men or women, men or boys who are victims of sexual abuse, again, either by women or male assailants. But for whatever reason, the movement itself on the Internet can't seem to keep itself from going after women as opposed to helping men. And
that,
what you were mentioning is absolutely correct. Given the choice between stepping up for a man who's been victimized by a crime or coming down on a woman who's saying she was a victim of a crime, they seem to always choose to go after the woman who says she's been a victim.
Well, and there was a recent example of that just last week. This guy named who goes by the name John Rambo from Crimes Against Fathers, who basically said, there was this videotape of two co-eds having sex, and the woman says that she was too drunk to consent. And this guy, so-called AKA John Rambo from Crimes Against Fathers, identified the woman, supposedly. But it turns out the woman that he identified was not the woman in the video. And now this woman is getting tons of phone calls and hate mail from these supposed men's rights activists, even though she's, first of all, she's not the woman in the video. Second of all, what are they thinking to be sending hate mail and making hate phone calls to anybody who would be claiming to be a victim of rape?
Yeah, and a lot of the people who I spoke with who were sort of starters, at least on the Internet, of the movement, are sort of quick to say, those people have nothing to do with us. And yet it's, I think one of the things that I said in the Daily Beast is, if you grow a political movement primarily by calling women the B word, the C word, etc., you shouldn't be surprised if a great number of people join your movement simply because they like calling women the B word or the C word. Actually, there's an interesting example of what you're talking about. Shortly before I started research for the article, I don't know if you're aware of the story of Jimmy Savile from Great Britain. He's Great Britain's answer to Dick Clark. Big TV star, had a show that was similar to American Bandstand. And after he passed away, it turned out that he was a pedophile. And
right, I have heard that.
Right, his victims were both male and female, and some of them were young teens, but some of them were under 10 years of age. And it's an interesting note to see, because it sort of gives you a lab example for the men's rights movement of, here's somebody that did in fact abuse boys, who the system, because it turns out people did in fact know about it, and because he was a celebrity and been knighted, they hid it. So it was sort of, if you were a men's rights activist, it might be what you might be considered the perfect story that you want to shout from the mountaintops to say, look, we were right. But what happens within the men's rights movement, for the most part, is interesting, because 80% of the victims were female and not male. Most of the men's rights movement doesn't mention it at all, and those that do come down hard on critics of Savile. They're given the opportunity to either point the finger at somebody who abused boys and condemn him, or let him off the hook because women were also victimized. They chose to let him off the hook.
Well, it reminds me a lot of the Tea Party movement's treatment of racists in their midst. Tea Party leaders exclaiming, "We're not all racists." Meanwhile, you go to the rallies, you go to the online websites that they frequent, and you just find a whole bunch of racism.
Right, and I actually think that comparison is pretty on the nose. I would say that if there's a common denominator between the Tea Party and the men's rights movement, it's that each has so isolated themselves within a bubble where they get information from only certain sources, and any information that's outside of that sources is automatically labeled a lie, sort of regardless of where it comes
Well, and
from.
Mr. Kelly, I hate to cut you off there, but we do have to take off. Thankfully, they do keep themselves in this bubble, and they don't grow as a result because people are so horribly offended. R. Todd Kelly, read his piece at BuzzFeed. It's fantastic. The Masculine Mystique. We'll be back in just a minute.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. 22 U.S. senators are co-sponsoring the Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative aimed at revitalizing America's manufacturing industry to create more good jobs. Wisconsin U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin is one of them.
It's an initiative to bring together a bunch of really good ideas that will help strengthen manufacturing in America after decades, frankly, of erosion in that sector of our economy. I just believe you can't have an economy built to last that doesn't involve making things.
Baldwin says the initiative is a package of legislation designed to help American manufacturers grow and assist workers in getting the skills needed for the next generation of manufacturing jobs.
We've come together around 4 general themes that include focusing in on the workforce and preparing a 21st century advanced manufacturing workforce, opening markets abroad, creating the conditions necessary for growth, and expanding access to capital for manufacturers who might be able to initiate operations or expand.
The Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative has the support of the AFL-CIO, the National Association of Manufacturers, Ford Motor Company, the United Auto Workers, United Steelworkers, Dow, DuPont, General Electric, and the Blue-Green Alliance, among others. Verizon Wireless workers are seeking greater job protections in stalled contract negotiations. Jesse Russell reports.
Verizon Wireless workers walked off the job in Southern California on Tuesday over stalled contract negotiations. The workers, represented by the Communications Workers of America Local 9400, are unhappy with a company proposal that would see employee medical costs increase. The union is also requesting that Verizon set a limit to how many non-union contractors can be used for building projects, and to also restrict the outsourcing of call center jobs. The two sides have been in negotiations for 7 months, and a federal mediator was brought to the table on Monday.
Indonesia is the most recent country to see a national strike as tens of thousands of workers took to the streets on Wednesday. The workers were demanding a 50% wage increase, claiming the government has failed to accurately adjust the cost of living index. Workers Independent News will end November 15th unless listeners step up immediately to support this broadcast. If you value this newscast, go to laborradio.org right now and hit the donate button to keep this newscast on the air. Spread the word in social media and any other way you can. laborradio.org, hit the donate button to support us. After more than a decade, Workers Independent News will cease to exist November 15th unless emergency efforts to raise enough money to keep going are successful. Please spread the word and do all you can to support Workers Independent News. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal, or shelter, or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10, and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
Here's a scary number to ponder: 12,407. That's how many registered lobbyists there are in Washington, the bulk of whom are paid handsomely to carry water for avaricious corporations. And that doesn't count the untold number of influence peddlers who do not stoop to register, for they don't consider themselves to be mere lobbyists, even though they are paid extravagant salaries by elite lobbying firms. Rather than lobby, they advise. These are longtime Washington insiders who act as Sherpas, guiding corporate favor seekers through the labyrinth of congressional backrooms and executive branch offices to reach the peaks of legislative and regulatory power. Today's lobbying corps, you see, is no longer the domain of common hustlers, but of credentialed and well-connected professionals, including more than 400 former U.S. senators and House members, plus more than 5,000 former legislative staffers, all cashing in on the connections and insider knowledge they gained at taxpayer expense. Lobbying is now a $3.3 billion a year influence industry, an unelected private government of, by, and for special interests. And get this, it even has its own lobbying group, the American League of Lobbyists, which lobbies for lobbyists. As you might imagine, having such a powerful presence has given many within lobby world an elevated sense of their own worthiness. So now they want to drop the tacky label of lobbyist. Instead, the League of Lobbyists is asking its members to suggest a more prestigious and less pejorative brand name. Reportedly, an early favorite is Government Relations Professional. But I think that's too ponderous. I think any new phrase needs to spell out a zippy acronym like slick, creep, or leech that really defines their work. This is Jim Hightower saying, to paraphrase Shakespeare, a lobbyist by any other name would smell the same.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Karl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Welcome back. Hello, this is Take Action News. All weekend, I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. You can sign up for my email list. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch, and be sure to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. So there's an election taking place in New Jersey and Virginia on Tuesday. Here in Virginia, not too far from here at least, you've got Terry McAuliffe taking on Ken Cuccinelli in the governor's race. And it's tens of millions of dollars are being spent. Everybody's watching it. And people are asking, are young people going to turn out and vote? And you know what's crazy about that is that In 2012, everybody said that young people weren't going to vote in the same numbers that they did in 2008, and in fact, they voted in larger numbers. So I thought we'd see how young people are being discouraged from voting once again, and how they're being counted and expectations are being lowered with our good friend, the National Political Director for Rock the Vote, Amanda Brown. Amanda, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
So, how much are you sick of people saying that young people don't matter in 2013, given what they said about y'all in 2012?
I know, it never gets old, but the one thing that I think is so great about myself, and I will continue to call myself a millennial until I turn 30, but we really do surprise everyone. So everyone is constantly trying to say that we don't show up, we're not even registered to vote, which could not be further from the truth. I mean, right now, young people in Virginia alone make up about 18% of the electorate.
And it's growing.
Yeah, I mean, the state population of Virginia is becoming so much. It's, the trend there is getting younger and younger. The population, I think, of the state has grown 1 million people, and the student population of that is like an overwhelming majority of that 1 million that are growing. So it'll be really exciting, actually, to prove on Tuesday, really on Wednesday morning, that I told you so, because these young people are going to make it out.
Well, I mean, in 2012, it was the exact same thing. Everybody said that young people propelled Barack Obama into the White House, and then in 2012, it was, young people aren't going to vote. They don't. I mean, they don't even care.
Get into the story.
They'd rather get high.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's always an excuse. There's always, and I think
But the numbers were even bigger.
It's an easy message to say, right? People they don't think that young people are reliable voters, and it's true. Young people, they haven't been able to form the habit in the same way that any other demographic has. We're talking about people that have voted once or maybe twice for lucky. That you can't talk about habits at that point. What we're trying to do, and I think Rock the Vote, what we try to do every single day, is really make sure that these folks that do turn out in 2012, even now that they're turning out in the 2013 election, that'll be a huge story, because that they're one more election closer to this being a habit.
Well, and towards that end, I mean, one of the things that you all know at Rock the Vote is that sometimes all it takes is just asking to get somebody to turn out and vote.
Absolutely.
The numbers are striking when you compare people who aren't asked to vote versus young people who are asked to vote. How serious are the gubernatorial candidates about reaching young people?
I actually think so. I was just kind of looking through the Rock the Vote archives, even going back to 2009, and the story was so clearly, these candidates were out there, they never once talked to young people. And you're seeing something completely different this time around. And that goes to show the fact that young people are overwhelming a lot of these different elections and have been really swaying them for the past 2 election cycles across the country. So they're not stupid, right? They know that these young people are going to play a key role. So you saw Terry McAuliffe's campaign, put Bill Clinton on like 5 different college campuses last week. You saw even Cuccinelli, he went to Liberty College, which is right now the fastest growing school in the state.
Now, I put Liberty University, I put the university in air quotes. I know that you don't, but I put it in air quotes.
I know. There is a very huge online population, but we're still talking about the most, when you look at the precincts and cut it out, that is actually the most youth-dense precinct in the state right now.
Well, and so they've obviously gone after the young vote, and we're going to see that come to fruition on Election Day.
Yeah.
What issues are folks talking about to interest young people? I mean, it can't be good for Cuccinelli that the constant refrain about his being anti-gay and anti-woman's choice and so on. Those things must be, not helping.
No, definitely. And I will say, even going back to your last question, is no one's going to turn out by accident. Targeted voters turn out because they were they were actually targeted. So we're actually talking about a cycle. So when young voters are going to vote when the candidates actually engage them on the issues that they care about, what you're seeing right now, and then candidates will engage young people when they know that young people are voting. So I think that just kind of speaks to the ebb and flow here. But I will say that young voters you can't watch this election cycle without about becoming, completely, you're just like inundated with everything that's affecting you on a day-to-day basis. And when we're talking about young women voters in the state of Virginia, I mean, I can't even imagine the feeling that they have right now and the urgency that they have to get to the polls around the issues that are being discussed. And they're following the stories. The government shutdown, what's happening with healthcare right now, they're dealing with decisions that are being made and sometimes not being made about their student loan rates. They're being affected by these decisions, and they know who's making them, and they know that they're the ones that are really going to be the ones that are going to get affected here. So they definitely have their eye on the pulse, and they're watching. They're definitely paying attention, and I think it's really on the candidates to then say, you should vote for me because, and really make that appeal to these young folks.
Well, and at the same time, I think Democrats, there's this great story from U.S. News and World Report about how Democrats have a lot to be worried about in 2014 because there is a lack of interest, perhaps, among these growing demographics, particularly young people. What do you think happens in 2014 if members of Congress and the White House aren't doing enough to, talk about the issues that are important to young people?
Yeah, I think that they should be afraid of the youth vote, and, to be totally honest, millennials are huge in number, they're diverse, just in the world alone, they're consumers, they're empowered, they're connected, they're engaged, and this take over the world mentality that they have extends to voting. So they're registering to vote in record numbers, they're voting. The past election cycles are complete evidence of that, and by 2016, they're expected to make up 1/3 of the electorate. So for candidates that are going into the 2014 election cycle, consider this a warning, but you've got to reach out to young people because they are going to be the deciding factor. The numbers speak for themselves. And I really don't think, Virginia's no anomaly. Young people in the state make up the largest and most diverse coming-of-age movement that the state has ever seen. So the record-breaking increase...
Amanda, I pity the fool politician who does not pay attention to the youth vote.
Yeah, no,
because it's only a matter of time before they're the voting majority. Amanda Brown, National Political Director with Rock the Vote. We'll be checking in with you after this election to see how things go.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us.
I can't wait to say I told you so.
We look forward to it as well. This is Take Action News, and we'll be right back after this.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying your home. Free consultations at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/guardreserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast DC. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Take Action News. All weekend, I'm Karl Frisch. I don't know if you were watching the hearings this week in the U.S. Senate concerning Stand Your Ground. It's that law out in Florida and other states that basically gives free passage to anybody who wants to shoot somebody and then claim it was in self-defense. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's being used. I mean, it was used in, the Trayvon Martin case. And Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mother, who testified before the Senate, had to sit there as Ted Cruz, everybody's favorite Neanderthal senator from the state of Texas, lectured her about what the reality is with Stand Your Ground, as if she doesn't know all too well. Joining us now to talk about what the real reality is when it comes to Stand Your Ground is Rashad Robinson. He's the executive director of Color Change and a good friend of mine. Rashad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, so I don't know if you were watching as Ted Cruz tried to mansplain to Trayvon Martin's mother the so-called facts around the Stand Your Ground laws. Here's just one quote, and I want to get your response to it. He said, "Because many black people are victims of violent crime and need to defend themselves, the notion that Stand Your Ground laws are some sort of veiled racism may be a convenient political attack, but it's not borne out by the facts remotely." What do you think of that?
Well, he didn't share any facts to sort of back up that statement. Yes, many folks in our community are victims of violent crime, but in fact, Stand Your Ground has consistently not been a legal tool that black folks have been able to use. In the case of Melissa Alexander down in Florida is just one of the many examples that...
Well, tell people about that. I mean, I believe we're talking about the same case. It's an African-American woman who fired a shot in the air to scare off intruders, and then she was arrested and charged.
She was arrested and charged. No, she fired off warning shots to protect herself against a spouse who had been abusive for years, and she fired off warning shots that were clearly not aimed at any person or individual. And she was charged and convicted, and she tried to use Stand Your Ground as a legal defense, and she was not able to use it.
She would have had to have killed him. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And obviously, the prosecutors there could have done something about this, but they chose not to, which shows you part of the problem here. I mean, when crimes involving African Americans or Hispanic victims, the Stand Your Ground is ruled justified 78% of the time. So when a person of color is the victim of the gunshot, 78% of the time it's granted the stand your ground defense, compared to just 56% of the time when it's a white victim. And yet Cruz says race is not a factor here.
Well, anyone who says that race is not a factor in our criminal justice system, or in who gets convicted and not, and when all facts are equal, who's more likely to get harsher sentences, just isn't paying attention to what's actually happening and has a political agenda that is not about the facts. And so at the end of the day, it was I think good for folks who may be sort of in the middle, maybe thinking about these laws, to hear from Trayvon's mother, to hear from Jordan Russell Davis's mother, another young man in Florida who was killed, and his killer is using stand your ground as his legal defense.
That's the gentleman that was in a car outside of a convenience store when a guy just started shooting at the car, right?
Absolutely, and said that he didn't like that they were playing music too loud, and so
right.
you can shoot someone for that now. I mean, we should make no mistake about how these laws came into place. The stand your ground laws were written as a model bill of the American Legislative Exchange Council, the 40-year-old right-wing organization that creates what they call model legislation that they move out into states around the country on a wide range of laws. They work with corporations and state legislators to sort of advance this agenda. Walmart, along with the NRA, Walmart is the largest seller of rifles in this country. They wrote the Stand Your Ground law. This is a law that's been written by the gun industry to sell more guns and advance the gun industry's agenda of getting guns into all of our hands. This is not about protecting and making people safe in our communities. And in fact, in states where Stand Your Ground has been put in place, crimes have not went down, and in fact, shootings have went up.
Yeah, I mean, the Urban Institute has a number on it, and they say that in states with Stand Your Ground, white on black crimes are 354% more likely to be ruled justified than white on white crimes, even.
I mean, that shows the impact of laws like this, of when you take and you combine sort of corporate control over our democracy and the ways in which laws are moved, combined with injustice in our criminal justice system. And you take those two things, it's like a match to gunpowder, and the impact is in the story that was told by Sabrina Fulton, and the stories that we will continue to hear around this country unless we do something to overturn these laws.
Well, and how much of this is like the last dying grasps of a increasingly elderly, increasingly male, increasingly white conservative movement that knows that in order to motivate their folks, they can play on these issues. But that universe is shrinking fast. And even white folks that are 10 or 20 or 30 years younger, the younger you get, the more likely they are to be just offended by the notion that these laws have to be written.
I think you're absolutely right. But the fact of the matter is that the demographics are not going to be destiny right away, and we've got and so for the next 15 or 20 years, where these laws remain on the books, and they will continue, and the places where they will remain on the books the longest are the places where we oftentimes see the toughest challenges in our criminal justice system, or policing, or challenges around.
Well, and frankly, they're going to be in states that are already doing all sorts of things to shun African Americans, Hispanics, and other people of color. These are the same states that are using the fact that the Voting Rights Act was gutted to disenfranchise people of color. These are the same states that are doing these arcane pushes on immigration issues. So it's not like these things are not part and parcel of the same bigoted package.
They're all part of it, and the example of ALEC, being behind it, the same organization that was responsible for advancing the voter ID laws around the country, the same organization that pushed the Arizona Papers immigration law, that has sort of advanced their so-called right to work laws in places like Michigan and other places around the country, the breaking down of our environmental laws. Putting our communities at harm's way for the advancement of corporate power and corporations and the wealthiest Americans gaining more and more access to resources is part of the larger agenda, and we all will lose. So at Color of Change, we've been in this process of building momentum and energy. So as the next state legislatures come into session, we can start working to not only push back against these laws in places where we have opportunity for change, but also help to define who our friends and enemies are as we move people to action.
Well, and you've been really successful in that regard in getting some really major blue chip companies to leave ALEC, right?
Absolutely. Everyone from Walmart to Coca-Cola to McDonald's, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, major companies, 50 so far, have left the American Legislative Exchange Council, due to the corporate campaign that we've led at Color of Change, along with many fantastic partners. But we're also working to move the energy of those folks into working and partnering at the state level with organizations working to overturn Stand Your Ground and prevent it from being put in place in other states. And so folks can text ACT, A-C-T, that's ACT, A-C-T, to 225568, ACT to 225568, to join the campaign to overturn Stand Your Ground. I think what Senator Durbin and others are doing on Capitol Hill to shed a light nationally on this is important, but so much of the work we're going to have to do over the next several years to overturn these laws will be at the state level.
Well, and you couldn't be more right that shedding light is important, but we've also got to shed some truth when we've got people like Ted Cruz just lying out of their mouths, left, right, and center. When Ted Cruz is lying because his lips are moving. Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color of Change. Again, text ACT, A-C-T, to 225568. Rashad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be right back with more.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Back, Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend. So, I don't know. We've been talking a bit in this program about demographic changes that are, enrapturing the Republican Party. I was asked by Stephanie Miller on Thursday what my Halloween costume was. She was going as a box of wine, and I told her I was going as the incredible shrinking Republican Party, a spin-off of Lily Tomlin's character in The Incredible Shrinking Woman. And I say that because it's kind of sad to watch the state of the Republican Party these days. When I was growing up, there were two parties that both had, at least some chance of getting elected, and that chance is getting smaller and smaller for Republicans, which is why you see certain things happening, right? It's why you see all this gerrymandering shenanigans going on out there, where they've drawn districts that are 70% Republican. It's why you see them going after the way that we register voters and the way that voters vote, why they're putting in these ID restrictions and saying that you have to prove your citizenship in order to even register to vote in state and local elections. It's why they are trying to make it in many southern states so that you end up having white districts and black districts, where the whites control are Republican districts and the black districts are Democratic districts. It's kind of reversing the progress we've made. And thus, the Republican Party has made its choice. And here to chat with us a little bit is our good friend Jason Stanford. He's a syndicated columnist and Democratic strategist out of Texas, where all of this stuff was beta tested by the friends and family and colleagues of Tom DeLay. Jason Stanford, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Karl.
All right, so most of this country has not had the last 10 years of your life, or the last 20 years of your life, as Tom DeLay and his colleagues ripped apart the district maps in Texas, basically guaranteeing Republican majorities for some time, despite the emerging demographic changes there. Not to mention, just steamrolling every opportunity that they've had at the local and state level there to enshrine the power of the right. What can be done to reverse this trend? I mean, I've been saying for a while Republicans had two choices to make. They could change now and hurt now. Right. That is, lose a chunk of their base that would be upset if they started doing things rationally.
Right.
Or they could hurt later, which is when these demographic changes are insurmountable. And even in a 60% Republican district, they wouldn't have a choice.
Well, what the Republican Party has decided to do is choose the third option, which is both. I don't know if you looked inside the new NBC poll, but the fastest growing group in America that is dissatisfied with the Republican Party is the Republican Party.
Oh, but I don't even, I saw that poll, and I don't know, and maybe this is in the crosstabs, but I don't know if that these old white people are upset with the Republican Party because they are going after Social Security and Medicare, because it's never seemed to bother them before, or if they're upset with the Republican Party because of something even crazier, and that is they don't think the Republican Party is standing up enough against Barack Obama.
Well, I think there's a little bit of both, but as the Tea Party becomes marginalized, even in the Republican Party, among the voters, certainly not in the power base, I think there are a lot of Republicans out there who believe in the spherical nature of our planet, who are outraged at what's going on. This here in Texas, we are Rick Perry calls states laboratories of democracy. Well, we are the meth lab of democracy down here.
I hope it's blue, high quality.
Oh yeah, 97% crazy, absolutely. Yeah. And these guys are going nuts over. They just love the court ruling. The Fifth Court just is kept a law in place that's going to close down 90% of the abortion clinics in this state. And they love the fact that the D.C. court overturned the birth control mandate. I mean, they really do think that contraception causes abortions. They will say that sentence and not realize just how much it wanted.
And then they're shocked when Democrats offer to help their legislation by offering anti-masturbation clauses.
Yep, exactly.
But this is really not surprising. I mean, as a gay dude, I got to tell you, they've been trying to get in my bedroom for years, and it was only a matter of time before they turned back to the bedroom they love the most, which is the bedroom of the ladies, right?
Yeah.
They're all up in vaginas. I mean, they are more obsessed with vaginas than even people that are, the world-renowned OBGYNs.
That is an interesting idea, and we should compete on this column. We should each write a column and see who comes up with the better one about are OBGYNs or Republicans more obsessed with vaginas. I really think...
well, I mean, at least one has it as an occupation, and they're doing good by it. The other, not at all.
No, not so much. No, you're right. They have a fascination with lady parts that rivals anything I went through when I was 13 years old. I just can't understand it. Yeah, they really, and they don't fundamentally know how it works.
Well, and they can't really turn to women in their caucus. I remember, it just show. I mean, and the big demographic problem for them is not, it's funny because they think if we get a Hispanic guy, then Hispanics will like us. If we get Sarah Palin, the Hillary people will like us. No. The issues do matter. And, for example, they don't need to be pro-gay equality to win gay votes, because that's going to take a while. They need to be pro-gay equality because independent voters, especially independent women, think that people who are anti-gay are Looney Tunes.
Yeah. All they need to do, and this is their problem with immigration, if they just stop being racist, that would be okay.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, as we have this conversation about immigration reform, and there is a significant chunk of the Republican Party. I mean, you've got 3 Republicans already in the House that have come out for the Democratic plan for immigration reform. Ileana Ross-Layton from Florida, Jeff Denham from California, David Valdado from California, who have all come out for it. Because they know, what's more damaging than being against the Democratic plan for immigration reform is watching the Republican Party stumble over itself to be anti-immigrant while they push for immigration reform.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I liked how they all voted for that guy from Iowa, the Looney Tunes dude.
Steve King.
He voted to export all of our Mexican DREAM Act kids. To really undo the DREAM Act and get them all out of the country. And then he says the thing about cantaloupes and their calves, and then they fall all over themselves. Oh, no, Steve King doesn't speak for us, except we just keep voting for everything he puts up.
Yeah. I mean, we want immigration reform, but we need a wall first. We need a moat by that wall. We need that wall electrified, but we don't hate immigrants.
Right. Now, let's look back at what George W. Bush did. The guy was brilliant, and I really think he actually meant this at the time. He was too good at this, and he would have gotten caught over a term and a half in Texas and 2 terms in the White House. He really thought Hispanic people were real Americans, just they were humans. I mean, he was a decent human being about this. Now, did we ever get immigration reform? No. Did it matter? No. He got about half the Hispanic vote because he just wasn't an a-hole.
He had compassion about it, and he wanted real reform.
Yeah.
He wasn't using reform as a trope to win Hispanic votes, while at the same time placating the bigots in his base.
Yeah. So if the Republican Party, going back to your original question, if the Republican Party wants to do better with Hispanics or, do less badly, if they want white suburban women to stop fleeing their party as if escaping an abusive husband, a good first step, absent all policy considerations, absent all token minority candidates,
is just shut up.
How about just stop being a-holes?
Right.
Step one. That would be great. And they keep getting stuck on step one.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, it's like they all go to a-hole university before they arrive in Congress. And they know that they're in a permanent, and we've got to cut it short here, Jason, but they know they're in a permanent eventual minority status, so they're all competing to build the biggest list to make the most money so that they can keep themselves and the power that they've got. Jason Stanford, Democratic strategist from the great state of Texas and syndicated columnist, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Alrighty, this is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be back after this.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders and best in pediatric care, call a Mott patient advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. All weekend, if you've paid attention at all this week, you've heard nonstop Republican attacks on the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. First, it was the website having problems, which we all acknowledge that the website's got its issues. But now it's because President Obama lied. He lied to us. He said we could keep our insurance, our crappy insurance. And I got to tell you, a lot of the plans that these people are clamoring about having been canceled are being canceled because they're junk insurance that wouldn't actually give them any treatment worth the money they've been spending on them should they actually become sick or injured or whatever. Joining us to talk about the week that was attacks on the Affordable Care Act is Igor Vlasky from Think Progress. Igor, thanks for joining us. Igor, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. There we go. Listen, what a week it was. I'm glad it's over, but I fear the debate is still going to rage for the foreseeable future.
You don't think they're just going to pack it up and go home?
Small chance, I guess. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, one of the biggest problems I've seen all week is the way that the media has been covering the issue, as if it's shocking that people had subpar insurance that would be altered by the Affordable Care Act's guarantees of no lifetime cap and no being kicked out for pre-existing conditions, being forced to cover certain things, etc.
Yeah, or as if it's shocking that a regulation that came out in 2010 that was widely covered at the time, it was in fact the first Republican attempt to try to roll back Obamacare, was to try to weaken this grandfather regulation. They treated it as some kind of breaking news, some kind of scoop that they discovered that people in plans that charge people too much and change their change how much you have to pay and what kind of benefits they cover, that's going to go away because those plans just aren't good enough.
Right. I mean, we've known about this since 2010. It was acknowledged that policies that don't meet minimum standards were grandfathered in, but many since then have substantially changed, which makes them eligible to be booted from ACA because of the changes.
Yeah. And the grandfather rules were fairly clear, and they had an avenue that plans can go if they want to, kind of keep up with changing healthcare costs. They could increase copays, they could increase premiums by certain levels because, of course, as healthcare costs increase, you're going to want to increase those things as well, and that was acceptable under the regulation. It just said that if you go too much in that direction and you shift too much of the cost and risk of healthcare to the individual, that's when they lose their grandfather status, and that's when they have to comply with the new rules.
So shouldn't people be up in arms about the insurance industry then?
I mean, I think so,
If they have a concern. I mean, I think this is a good thing.
Look, it's shocking to me that some people woke up earlier this week and found out for the first time that insurers have been canceling coverage on people, that insurers have been rescinding plans. I mean, that has been going on for years and years and years.
It used to be called How We Make Money.
Right, exactly, precisely. But now that it's happening under Obamacare, it's, oh my goodness. I mean, yes, it's a problem. It's a problem for Obamacare. It's a problem that the people who are getting cancellation notices can't get better coverage under Obamacare. But the context here is just as important. The rules went into effect because the plans were so bad to begin with.
Well, let's look at some of the facts about these types of plans. So, more than 60% of medical bankruptcies occurred because people who already had insurance. That means that you lost everything you owned, every penny you had, to a medical problem, even though you had health insurance.
Exactly, which is why when people get these cancellation notices and they think to themselves, well, my goodness, I used to pay $98 a month for this plan that I didn't really use, but it was cheap, and now I'm going to have to pay $200 a month. Oh, my goodness. Well, the fact is that if you actually become sick, at the end of the day, because your new plan is more comprehensive, you're going to be paying less in terms of healthcare costs than you would be with that $98 plan.
We all will pay less because you're not becoming a burden to the taxpayer as a result of this issue too. I mean, and the right-wing response to this, Igor, would be like if I was a Fox News host, right? I would then say, "Oh yeah, well, Igor, you going to use maternity leave, Igor?
Right.
You going to have a baby, Igor?
Yeah, exactly.
You going to have a baby?"
Yeah, or actually, you bring up Fox News. In a Fox News green room today, I was asked, why do gay men need to buy contraceptives? And I think the answer to all of those questions is you want to cover all of those benefits because that's how you spread the risk.
It's called insurance. It's called insurance. If we could predict when we were going to have cancer or a heart attack, we wouldn't have a need for insurance like this.
You know, and you notice that those people who complain about maternity leave never complain about insurance having to cover prostate exams or other things that only affect men. It's always those lady examinations they have such a problem with.
Well, you know, partially it's they're afraid for science to get too close to a vagina because they might know more than they do. So you've got, and then we can look at what insurance companies have been doing for ages, right? Look at WellPoint, the nation's largest insurer. They used an algorithm, and this is positively sickening, to target women with breast cancer and investigate them for fraud. The company lied to prosecutors about this. They were essentially trying to find women with breast cancer because they know that's expensive to treat and cover, and then they were looking for whatever ways they could to boot those women from their coverage.
Yeah, talk about canceled policies. You know, in the old healthcare market, there is still a federal law that says you can't rescind insurance plans. But the problem is that the law is enforced by the states.
Right.
And in the overwhelming majority of states, you have insurance commissioners who are really a proxy for the insurers. They aren't on the consumer side and don't care very much in enforcing these laws. So insurers like WellPoint and others paid, fines almost every year. I mean, the papers were filled with this kind of abuse. They would pay a fine and move on their merry way.
Well, here's another one. Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield agreed to pay $13 million in fines and offer new health care coverage to more than 2,200 Californians the company dropped after those people became ill.
Yes. Yeah, welcome. That's the old insurance market that we would go to if
it's called a death panel. It's called a death panel, my friends.
Yeah,
that's exactly. What a death panel is. What insurance companies used to be. So, after week 1 being the website and week 2 being this trumped up story, where do you see the story continuing in the new week?
Well, week 3 is going to be the provider networks, because a lot of these insurance plans that are offered in the exchanges have relatively undeveloped provider networks. And so some major hospital chains in some parts of the country don't yet participate in the plans. And so you're going to see a lot of stories about you can't keep the doctor you have if you like him. That's going to be the next step of this entire campaign. And the truth is that insurers have been limiting provider networks as a way to keep down costs for a very long time. There's a smart way to do it by saying let's only work with efficient providers. But there's also, a bad way to do it, which is to exclude some good providers from your network. So that's going to be something that folks who support the law are going to have to grapple with.
Well, in fact, I saw Greta Van Susteren had a doctor on who has been kicked off of a few insurance plans. It looks like the turn is already going that direction.
Yeah, the truth is, a lot of this is really based onto the state, in terms of state regulations. It's left up to the states, and some states, for instance, require insurers to have all providers or the biggest providers by market share. So it really depends, and I'm not sure how much federal regulation and changes there are in Obamacare expanding the network requirements. But because it's kind of a patchwork system across the country, I think, conservatives aren't going to have a very hard time finding some so-called horror stories about the networks.
Well, and, Fox News has been obscuring the Republican role in the Medicaid coverage gap.
Oh, yes.
Within the ACA and blaming the administration, even though it's right-wing governors that are failing to expand Medicaid that these problems are resulting in.
Yeah, the Medicaid story is very strange to me. I mean, in reality, the fact that you have thousands of low-income people signing up for coverage and for the first time having insurance is pretty remarkable. And the fact that the auto-enrollment processes at Medicaid are working so well is kind of the silver lining of the entire...
Well, and Igor, we're going to have to leave it there and talk more about this in the weeks ahead as we continue to watch the Affordable Care Act being implemented. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be back in the next hour.
there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Who is stopping nearly 3 million kids in America from even talking to their parents?
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Today in America, 2.7 million children have a parent who is incarcerated, an experience that for kids can be as traumatic as divorce or even death. Prisoners, who often are housed hundreds of miles away from their families, can only stay connected with their kids by phone. But for-profit prison phone companies like Global Tellink, by charging sky-high rates, $17 for a 15-minute call, make families choose between having enough to eat or money to pay the doctor or talking to dad. Why do companies do this? Because they can. Last August, the Federal Communications Commission capped the price for inmate calls at 25 cents per minute for interstate calls, that is, say, from Connecticut to New York or Massachusetts. A good step, but a small one, because most prisoners are serving time in their home state, and so the FCC edict doesn't help them or their families or their kids. Yet, the FCC can and should finish the job by capping in-state prison phone rates at a fair price. And there is a petition at the FCC urging the commission to do exactly that. So if you go online and sign the petition, almost 3 million kids in America will thank you.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union at aclu.org, because freedom can't defend itself.
This is the Working Virginia Update. I'm Jesse Russell. One of the next battlegrounds for marriage equality is in Virginia, where 2 federal lawsuits are advancing in the legal process this week. From Richmond, Catherine Komp reports.
The 2 suits seek to invalidate the state's ban on same-sex marriage and civil unions, and its refusal to recognize legal marriages from other states. Reducing this inequality, says Nancy Wohlforth, founder of the AFL-CIO's Pride at Work initiative, will help working families across the state.
People who are able to get benefits for their entire family improves their life immensely, immediately, because they can cover their spouse and their children under a state employee's health plan.
Same-sex couples in Virginia are denied more than 1,000 other rights and benefits, including those concerning tax breaks, adoption, and perks given to military spouses.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown. Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty. Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live United.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. 22 U.S. senators are co-sponsoring the Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative aimed at revitalizing America's manufacturing industry to create more good jobs. Wisconsin U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin is one of them.
It's an initiative to bring together a bunch of really good ideas that will help strengthen manufacturing in America. After decades, frankly, of erosion in that sector of our economy, I just believe you can't have an economy built to last that doesn't involve making things.
Baldwin says the initiative is a package of legislation designed to help American manufacturers grow and assist workers in getting the skills needed for the next generation of manufacturing jobs.
We've come together around 4 general themes that include focusing in on the workforce and preparing a 21st century advanced manufacturing workforce, opening markets abroad, creating the conditions necessary for growth, and expanding access to capital for manufacturers who might be able to initiate operations or expand.
The Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative has the support of the AFL-CIO, the National Association of Manufacturers, Ford Motor Company, the United Auto Workers, United Steelworkers, Dow, DuPont, General Electric, and the Blue-Green Alliance, among others. Verizon Wireless workers are seeking greater job protections in stalled contract negotiations. Jesse Russell reports.
Verizon Wireless workers walked off the job in Southern California on Tuesday over stalled contract negotiations. The workers, represented by the Communications Workers of America, Local 9400, are unhappy with a company proposal that would see employee medical costs increase. The union is also requesting that Verizon set a limit to how many non-union contractors can be used for building projects, and to also restrict the outsourcing of call center jobs. The 2 sides have been in negotiations for 7 months, and a federal mediator was brought to the table on Monday.
Indonesia is the most recent country to see a national strike as tens of thousands of workers took to the streets on Wednesday. The workers were demanding a 50% wage increase, claiming the government has failed to accurately adjust the cost of living index. Workers Independent News will end November 15th unless listeners step up immediately to support this broadcast. If you value this newscast, go to laborradio.org right now and hit the donate button to keep this newscast on the air. Spread the word in social media and any other way you can. laborradio.org, Hit the donate button to support us. After more than a decade, Workers Independent News will cease to exist November 15th unless emergency efforts to raise enough money to keep going are successful. Please spread the word and do all you can to support Workers Independent News. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Karl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. All weekend, I'm Karl Frisch. Be sure to go to my website, karlfrisch.com, sign up for my email list, and follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. And don't forget to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. In the end of the last hour, we were talking about Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, and these right-wing attacks on the program, the notion that these shoddy insurance policies that so many people had would be canceled in favor of things that actually covered illnesses and didn't have caps, that you would eventually expire, etc. The problems with the Medicare gap and all these other issues, these right-wing tropes that are being brought up. I bet if I were to ask you which state has the highest level of Affordable Care Act enrollment, Obamacare enrollment, you would not pick the home state of Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul. But you should pick Kentucky because that's exactly the state that is leading the charge, thanks in no small part to Governor Steve Beshear, a Democrat, who has done a fantastic job of getting people enrolled with Obamacare, setting up the state exchange there. And it's kind of surprising. One of the biggest opponents to the Affordable Care Act is Rand Paul from the state, and Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader. You've got two Republican senators who have spent basically all of their time over the last 3 years, attacking the program and trying to say that it could never work, it should never work, this won't work for the people of America, it won't work for the people of Kentucky. And yet, thanks to the hard work of Governor Steve Beshear, Kentucky, a bastion of anti-government ire, is the top state for Obamacare enrollment. And it's kind of a surprise if you think about it. But it's exactly what could be happening in southern states, where there's significantly more poverty than a lot of states, if Republican governors would just get out of the way and let the Medicare expansion happen, if they would let these networks be created, we'd be seeing this in state after state. Joining me now to talk about the state of Kentucky, the bluegrass state, is our friend from the Daily Beast, Jonathan Miller. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
All right, so what did it's perhaps such a compelling example because Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell hail from the state that happens to be leading the country with Obamacare enrollment. I mean, that isn't any, you couldn't paint a funnier picture.
Yeah, if you looked up the phrase delicious irony in the dictionary, it would be this situation, because there have been really I guess you could throw Ted Cruz in there, but besides Ted Cruz, there's really been no more vocal opposition to Obamacare than Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul. And the two guys, they don't necessarily get along with each other. This is the one issue that unites them. But if you looked at the data in the New York Times over the weekend in terms of how the states have been implementing Obamacare, Kentucky is doing by far the best on a per capita basis. And
so what are they doing that other places are not doing?
Well, we've got a governor in Steve Beshear, and
right.
I made some disclosure in my Daily Beast piece. I ran against him for governor. He beat me, and he later appointed me into his administration as punishment. He made me finance secretary during the worst financial crisis in American modern history. But he is a guy who is in his final term. He's going to retire afterwards. He wants to leave a legacy, and he has made this his highest priority and shown a lot of political leadership to his bureaucracy. But he also has been able to hire a bunch of people who are at the health cabinet, as well as my old finance cabinet that does the IT work for the state, that spent months in getting this ready and getting it tested and working with the private sector so that on day one it would be a big success. And as someone who supports Obamacare, I've been disappointed with what's going on the national level, but I know it will work out ultimately. But it is
well, and that's the best medicine, right, for the haters of the Affordable Care Act, is when it actually starts, when people start actually getting the care, is when the jig is up.
Yeah, and that's what's happening in Kentucky. That we have such a strong Tea Party strand in Kentucky. I mean, we were ground zero. We were the guys that brought Rand Paul to the fore. But I mean, people are signing up in large numbers because we need it desperately.
Well, and what's crazy is that I've talked to numerous people, conservatives, who were shocked when they got to a state exchange or the national exchange, and when they got through and saw what their options were, that none of them said the state of Kentucky's healthcare plan, the United States healthcare plan. It was Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, Kaiser Permanente, and so on. All private plans. It's as if the best antidote to the lies that have been told over the last 3 years is the plan itself.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And when you get people who are getting the system and they're finding out the large majority of them are finding very affordable health care, and it's bringing this to folks who haven't been on health care for quite some time, or perhaps all their lives. And so this is literally saving people's lives. There's no exaggeration to say that, and it's just such a great thrill to see my home state, which has been so far behind on so many measures, including the people we send to Washington, to be leading this on a national basis.
Well, Jonathan, in the minute or so that we have left, what's been the right-wing response to the success in Kentucky?
Well, McConnell and Rand Paul have continued to take the offensive. McConnell is now in a race for his life. We've got a strong candidate in Allison Lundergan Grimes running against him, and they're continuing to repeat the old tripes. But the facts on the ground continue to contradict this. So I really see over the next several months, as more people sign up and see what it is, what a great program it is, and the skeptics are finding out how it is not going to destroy our American way of life, that this will be something that even Kentuckians in our red conservative state are going to ultimately embrace.
Yeah, they're going to become either the Chicken Littles or the Republicans who cried Obamacare at a certain point.
That's a great point. Exactly.
It's absolutely fascinating. It's an interesting take that you get to see. You're a former 2-term Kentucky state treasurer, and you're now writing at the recoveringpolitician.com. We look forward to seeing how things continue to develop. What do you think is next in terms of the fight over Obamacare?
Well, I think that on the national level, they will get their act together, and I think they're going to see the same sort of success that Kentucky has once its technology is set. And I think you're exactly right. Ultimately, when people are forced to really take a close look at it and understand how it is so beneficial to so many people,
all the cobwebs will just fall right away. Jonathan Miller,
Republicans are going to regret calling it Obamacare.
The former state treasurer of Kentucky, I want to thank you for coming on and joining us to talk about your piece from the Daily Beast. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be back after this.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Welcome back. Take Action News all weekend. I'm Karl Frisch. On Tuesday morning of this week, almost 10 years after the U.S. government began using drones to target suspected militants in Pakistan, one of the tools in the war on terror that the Obama administration has embraced and expanded since taking office in 2009, members of Congress heard for the first time about the policy's innocent victims, from some of the policy's innocent victims, I should say. Joining us to talk about this gathering on the Hill is Cole Stangler, our good friend from In These Times. Cole, thanks for joining us.
Great to be back.
So, obviously, this was not an official hearing because, heaven forbid, the Republican majority in the House of Representatives would allow such a hearing to be official on an issue that isn't Obamacare. But it was nonetheless poignant, to say the least. Half a dozen members of Congress, all Democrats, were in attendance, despite the fact that Republicans were invited. The gathering was organized by Congressman Grayson from Florida. Tell us about it. You were there.
Right. So, I mean, you've actually had a couple of hearings talking about drone policy that the Progressive Caucus has tried to put together over the last year. But this is actually the first time where Congress members are actually sitting and being able to talk to face-to-face to victims of the policy. Right. So, I mean, since the drone policy in Pakistan started in 2004, there's been over 300 strikes thousands of people killed, many of them civilians, hundreds of civilians at the very least.
Well, and there's really, I mean, we had conversations last week with Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch about some studies out. There's really no way to know exactly because we have so little information from our own government, let alone how they've classified people that may or may not be militants. I mean,
True.
broad sweeping.
Right, I mean,
go ahead.
You mentioned, I think, right before the segment, talking about the strike today that happened in Pakistan that supposedly killed a Taliban commander. And there's no way to necessarily dispute that, but when you have these reports that they'll cite 5 militants have been killed.
Right.
All these reports that just cite militants killed, and you don't actually know.
Well, yeah, one of them could very well be just some guy that was young and Muslim and in the vicinity, for all they care.
Right.
So this Congressman Grayson brought together members of Congress to hear these stories from the victims. First time they've done this. He invited Republicans. There's been this kind of meeting of the minds on the right and the left, the libertarian right and the progressive left over the drone issue, but still no Republicans attended this meeting.
Yeah. I mean, that is a good point. And my impression is I think they were expecting at least some Republicans to show up, and supposedly the government shutdown and fight over the debt ceiling kind of reintroduced some bad blood. So I guess politically, that wasn't the best move for some House members, Republicans. But at the same time, I think it kind of puts a dent into this notion that there's this growing bipartisan consensus that's on principle opposed to U.S. militarism, or excuse me, at least U.S. drone policy for one. When you have people like Justin Amash, who's become something of kind of the new anti-war face on the libertarian right, people have legitimate scheduling excuses, and people are very busy. There are a number of different hearings going on that day. But at the same time, you wonder, how genuine is that kind of...
Well, I can tell you as somebody who used to work for a member of Congress, if something's a priority, something's a priority.
If you want to be there, you can be there.
Right. So tell us about the stories that these members heard. One was from, a teacher whose mother had been killed by a drone strike.
Right. So the people in attendance, it was the Raymond family. There was like you said, a school teacher and his 2 young children, and his mother, their grandmother, had been killed in a drone strike. 67 years old, was gardening on the eve of the holy day of Eid al-Adha. Strike, killed, and 2 of the children were injured. One of them talked about, the 13-year-old boy talked about getting shrapnel in his leg, and the 9-year-old girl, Nabila, talked about getting blood on her hands and walking throughout the house. So it was a very very emotional hearing, and I think Grayson was tearing up at some point. I mean, just having a 9-year-old girl talking about seeing her grandmother getting killed like that is it was really moving and very sad. And what I think was also interesting was that it got a decent amount of press coverage too.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, I think can be characterized as fairly successful. Because you don't hear a lot from the victims. You don't.
Well, and you occasionally hear about the drone issue, but I've been saying this for a while. You go back to 2008, excuse me, and look at the presidential debates between the Republicans and the Democrats, and then the 2 together, and not a single question was asked in any of those debates about executive power. Nearly all of those debates in 2012, the same thing, until you had the general election debates. So we're not, the media is not asking these politicians on a range of issues related to drones or other executive powers before we have an opportunity to vote on them. And then, what was it, in March or April that the president had his open remarks about the drone issue and how he was going to seek...
I think it was in May, yeah.
Right, he was going to seek, increased controls, more accountability, more transparency. We're not seeing that yet. And finally, we get to hear from victims here. So it's not surprising. I guess it is surprising, to me at least, as kind of a cynical media watcher, that the media is finally, paying attention a little bit. But it's these kinds of things that get the media's attention and get them to talk about these issues. That's why it's so important.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree. And I think another point too is, and this is the part of the hearing that was a little bit vague and I guess necessarily so, but you have these members of Congress coming to the hearing, but it's unclear what actually steps are going to be taken. That part of it was very vague. You had some people calling for a congressional investigation. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. They were asked about whether they should stop the drone program. I think Conyers said he wants to have some more oversight, but a lot of very vague statements, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we're still at a very early stage of trying to rein in, even the most, minimal protections on oversight protections of this program have yet to be put in place, and we're still far away from that. So I think this is very much kind of just a very early hearing. People are hoping can kind of lead to some movement at all in Congress.
Do you think we'll end up having more hearings like this, thanks to Congressman Grayson or other members?
I asked one of Grayson's aides about that, and he said not in the immediate future. I don't think that's going to be happening. People are dealing with a lot of stuff, so who knows? Maybe we'll see in the next couple months. As far as I know, there are not.
Well, and to that end, are you hearing? I mean, it's one thing to call for hearings when a Republican Congress just isn't. I mean, it's something you got to do, right? Put it on the record. We want hearings, even though the Republicans in Congress are not going to give them to you. It's another thing to use your power as members of Congress to bring these stories to the public. So, in that regard, there's significant ability. From the political end, is there any effort being made by Grayson's political team or progressives, perhaps from, Progressive Congress or others, on the drones front?
As far as I know, that's not the case. I think also, it wasn't just Grayson's office. I think part of the people that helped put the, push for this was the Brave New Foundation, because they have that film coming out.
Right.
I think it came out either today or maybe it was yesterday, and they helped work with Grayson's office on this. So I think they were a lot of the impetus behind this. But as far as I know, there's not any other pushes for this.
Well, and they're obviously, Brave New Films is obviously conducting action campaigns around drones and other national security issues. The film that you mentioned is The War on Whistleblowers, Free Press, and the National Security State. Folks can see
and the film Unmanned they have coming out as well.
And folks can see those at bravenewfilms.org. As somebody who covers these issues, have you noticed an uptick in interest in the pieces as they're reported out? Or has it kind of been roughly the same since, the drone issue kind of entered the larger, broader consciousness?
I think, as you were mentioning, there has been just more visibility of this issue going back to May, at least going back to May with the president's speech about this. I know what one of your favorite groups, Karl, Code Pink, has been helping to raise awareness around this. And there's a piece in the Washington Post about this hearing as well. So, I think it's moving not nearly fast enough. Some people think that, the anti-war movement got a big boost and a big kind of boost in visibility from the push against the intervention in Syria. And everyone knows Code Pink. And people were hoping that could carry over to a kind of broader push about drones. So, it's very open-ended at this point.
Well, I work on Near the Hill, and we see people out there often protesting the drone issue, and we'll continue to cover it here at Take Action News. Cole Stangler, staff writer in These Times, thanks for joining us. Alrighty, this is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend, and we'll be back in just a minute.
You're listening to WIAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer-answer-line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero and being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Oh, drat these computers.
Have you people ever seen computers before?
I hear there's rumors on the internet.
I've used on the Google.
I gotta get on that internet. I'm late on everything.
A series of tubes.
They're so naughty and so complex.
Computers are my forte.
They are his forte indeed. Joining us now, as he does each and every week, is Dr. Digipol, Alan Rosenblatt. Alan, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here again.
All right, and now for our latest installment of Conspiracy Theory Theater 3000, we go into the deep underbelly of your machinations about Mr. Snowden. Give us what you got, because I have some ideas on it too.
Well, so, we've been talking a lot about national security and the exposure of stuff going on there, from Snowden to Nat Wong to Michael Hayden. And it reminds me of the ongoing discussion about transparent government and some of the challenges that brings. And that reminds me of a book that was written in the 1990s by David Brin called The Transparent Society. And in it, he says that if we're really going to do transparency at the government level, you really have to be transparent across all of society. So if you expect government to be transparent, then the people have to be transparent, and so forth. And this got me kind of thinking about the whole Edward Snowden thing, because I heard in the news the other day.
Here we go, folks. Here we go.
Yep. He's got a job working for a Russian web tech company. And So I'm thinking, what's that all about, you know? Where's that? What's going on here?
This company that we have job for you at, Mr. Snowden, is in no way tied to the Russian government.
Not at all, not at all. So I'm thinking a couple different things could be going on. Number one, it may be that this was the plan all along, to discredit Snowden, to get him in exile from the United States, have him land in Russia, and be brought into the family of Russia. So now he is in place in Russia in order to be our mole, digging into their tech systems and find out what they're doing in terms of surveillance and in spying. Then I thought, well, if he's doing that, maybe Putin would find out about that, and then I should be careful about saying things like that because Putin would kill him. I'm going, no. Putin won't kill him. Putin has been on a roll lately about one-upping the United States. So what he should do is he should disclose to the world all the spying that Russia's been doing voluntarily. And this Trump Snowden makes Obama look embarrassed, and it makes Putin once again the champion of the world.
And then he can ride around on the back of a horse, bare-chested again, into the sunset.
I heard that photo was hacked.
I'm sure it was. Now, is this web tech company that Snowden is working at, is it by any chance located on a grassy knoll?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They won't tell us where it is, what it is, where he's located.
Well, the interesting thing, and Alan, this is why you might be onto something. The great thing about conspiracies is that any evidence to the contrary of a conspiracy is only evidence of how deep the conspiracy actually goes. And any evidence that might back up a conspiracy is only proof of how deep the conspiracy goes.
That's right. So it's a win-win situation.
Speaking of right-wing conspiracies, or to bring up right-wing conspiracies, let's talk about healthcare.gov in the time that we've got left. My good friend Clay Johnson at the Department of Better Technology has been appearing all over the media, and I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. We've had him on to talk about this before. Is that none of us should have been surprised that healthcare.gov had problems when you consider the standings report out 2 weeks ago, right after healthcare.gov launched, that said that 94% of all government IT projects that cost more than $10 million fail.
You know, I've talked to Clay about this extensively, as well as to others. And, you know, the federal procurement process is rigged to the companies that are big, that have better lawyers, that rather than better technologists. When I first, opened up my consulting practice the first time around several years ago, I started to go down the road of setting myself up as a government contractor, and it was so onerous that
mind-numbing.
I gave up on it. It wasn't worth it. And what happens is you get in and your best bet is, as a small business, is to get in as a subcontractor to these larger companies that have rigged the system. Now, There's an interesting story here. I had a conversation with Macon Phillips, who recently left as new media director at the White House to go over to the State Department and run new media over there. And he was telling me when they first came into the White House, they wanted to make open source technology for the White House so they could give it all back to the public. And he discovered that in order to bring in new contractors to do this, he'd have to open up the bidding process and go through this whole Byzantine kind of process to get somebody else in, and they would have been so far behind the eight ball that it would have been a joke. So he came up with a creative solution, and he rewrote the specifications for the software under the contract that was held by one of these mega corporations, forcing them to go out and hire another subcontractor who could do the work. Now that's an interesting approach.
It's an interesting way to get the job done, but not necessarily a way that you could cut out the middleman and save money.
Right, and certainly not something that you could pull off when you start thinking about multi-million-dollar projects. That's probably how we went through and built, the We the People petition site, which is, clearly a few $1,000 kind of project as opposed to a multi-million-dollar project. The Congress has always been at the mercy of, I think it's Lockheed, who sort of comes in to new members' offices and says, we will provide you with your desktop computers, your telephone network system, your networks, your software for managing constituent communications, and your chairs and desks and office equipment. And, and in that kind of cornered market, there's no incentive for the software systems to be improved upon.
Well, I mean, you could look at House websites even as early as a year or two ago, and find things that look like they belonged on GeoCities, let alone for a member of Congress. And towards that end, I mean, Clay Johnson, again from the Department of Better Technology, points out that in the mid-'90s, before Republicans took control of the House, that there was actually an office of technology advisors in the House of Representatives that advised members of Congress on technology policy, on the best technology tools and services for the government, et cetera. And now, watching the hearings the last 2 weeks with members of Congress questioning A, the contractors, and B, Secretary Sebelius, he says it's been like watching his 1-year-old toddler teach algebra to his cat.
Or watching my great-great-grandfather teach me how to use a computer.
Absolutely mind-numbing that you've got a bunch of people who can hardly use their BlackBerries trying to discuss technology with these providers.
It is really...
They end up letting the companies off the hook as a result.
Yeah, one of my biggest pet peeves, you'll see this all the time. When they refer to websites, when these members of Congress refer to websites, they always go off with, yes, and the website, www.health.gov. It's like, come on.
Well, it beats Bob Dole. In 1996, Bob Dole, at his first rally after accepting the Republican nomination, he was having a youth rally with Jack Kemp. They had signs that said, "Kemp is the dude," because that's cool. And he used to play football for the Buffalo Bills. And Bob Dole's up there giving his little speech to introduce Jack Kemp, who's the dude. And he says, my friends, go to Dole Kempcom and sign up on the internet. Right. I mean, not even saying .com, but...
Well, it's interesting that in that same year, Senator Dole accused President Clinton of creating a security leak on the White House website because there was a link to the Japanese embassy website, because there were talks going on between the United States and Japan over trade, and simply linking to the website. He saw that as a security leak.
And now, it doesn't feel like we've come too far since then.
Yeah, that's the point. Is while it, I love the way Brad, I'm drawing a blank. The Campaign Management Foundation, Brad Fitch, the president over there, talks about how each office is like is a small business, and it's like some are like the Santa, the Pinta, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and others are like the Starship Enterprise. And there are definitely some very sophisticated offices on the Hill, but there are also some really old-fashioned offices.
There are very few sophisticated members, I guess, is the problem. I mean, we ended up not getting much at all out of these hearings at all. I mean, when you've got a member of Congress saying, there are 50 million pieces of code building this website, it's like, okay, it doesn't matter how many pieces of code, portions of code there are. It's a matter of if the code is working. It can be long, it can be short, just ridiculous.
And the truth is, you could have 50 million pieces of code, and one line could be wrong and it's causing all the problems. It's not like it's a major issue. You just go and fix it.
No, it's just fascinating. It's horrible, and it's something that we should be getting to. Any conversation about what we're wrong here should talk about federal procurement. Alan Roosevelt, Dr. Digipol, thanks again for joining us, as you do each and every week.
Great to be here.
All righty. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend, and we'll be back after this.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. but you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course, Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying free consultation at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
Welcome back. Take Action News. As we closed up the show, for the better part of the last 25 years, constant Republican refrain has been privatization. And one of the pieces of industry, as it shouldn't really be called, but it's become a piece of industry where this privatization has really taken hold, is in the prison industry, or the for-profit prison industry, something that you would never think should even be about profit. But thanks to the great investigative reporting of a joint project of ProPublica and Huffington Post, we have this great series of journalistic pieces, Prisoners of Profit, and we're joined by the author of the latest installment, Chris Kirkham. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Alrighty, so in particular, you're focused here on Youth Services International and some of the issues going on in Florida. So basically what's happened is states and counties have turned over their prisons to be run by private corporations, which in turn are hardly regulated at all, and thus we end up with these horrible situations, particularly impacting young people, where they're not safe, they're not sanitary, and yet we don't find out about it unless there's pieces like yours, that get reported out. Walk us through your latest installment.
Right. So just to be totally clear, so I think ProPublica may have tweeted out the piece or featured it, but it wasn't a collaboration. This was Huffington Post investigation.
Gotcha.
Just to be clear. I started looking at juvenile justice in particular, and I was really interested in kind of for-profit companies that have gotten into the sort of juvenile incarceration business over the years. And I was very interested in. I was kind of looking at different states and the extent to which they have privatized their systems. And Florida stuck out as kind of one that has really. So they are fully 100% privatized for their what they call residential commitments, which is basically the sort of prison side of the juvenile justice system. Kids who are adjudicated by a judge and essentially sentenced. And so I was curious about, who the providers were in Florida, and this one company stuck out just because this was Youth Services International, and it was basically the same company run by this same guy named James Slattery, and he's basically run a series of sort of private prison operations for the better part of 25 years or so, and he started out of New York City, running halfway houses during, I guess it would have been the late 80s, early 90s, when the federal prison system was starting to experiment sort of with privatization. And sort of all along the way, there had just been a sort of this lengthy track record of problems, of either lawsuits where inmates were alleging that they had been, in one case, 4 women in one of these halfway houses were saying that they had been raped by this guy who was the resident advocate, who was supposed to be the guy who basically takes their complaints about abuse by guards. He was assaulting them, and through the years, these sort of problems just sort of clung to the company. There was a big riot in New Jersey at an immigration detention center. After the fact, a lot of advocates and sort of an investigation by the government found that a lot of the inmates were being mistreated. Guards were stealing their valuables. They were missing their flights when they were deported because they were very upset that they didn't have their jewelry or other valuables returned to them. So, these problems have sort of dogged this company through the years, yet they continue to sort of get contracts and they continue to be rewarded.
Well, and part of that is, as you report, due to the lax regulations that these companies have. In fact, in Florida, it's self-reporting.
Right. I mean, essentially, the providers, have to call the state. They have what's called reportable incidents, which are more serious if there's an assault or if there's a big fight or an escape. There's a number of other health issues that could come up, injuries. But right, I mean, it's sort of up to the providers, the contractors themselves to report this, and the state will certainly send monitors in to sort of to check on these things. But through the years, my reporting, it became clear that the state was sort of relying a lot on sort of paperwork, a lot of kind of contractual compliance stuff, forms filled out the right way to document, therapy sessions or, forms for medication, was it stored in the right place? But there weren't really a lot of sort of one-on-one confidential interviews with youth, with staff to really kind of get
no real follow-up.
Yeah, it was like, what's really... You weren't getting a picture of what was really going on.
Well, and if you're running a private prison, your goal is to have self-regulation, right? Because then you can cut corners, then you can save money so that you have more profit. You can provide less quality food. You can have less sanitary, quarters. You can treat people poorly, and you make more money as a result. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so ridiculous that these things are private in the first place.
Well, I think it's just a question of like when you privatize a very sort of core social service like this, the question that then comes up is like you remove yourself as the state from that situation, and so in my mind, I think your record keeping has to be 10 times as good,
right?
Or your monitoring, than it would be if you were running the system directly.
Well, and I've read stories, I think it was out of Texas, about judges who were in cahoots with the private prison industry, particularly dealing with young people, where they were sending people to specific private prisons and getting kickbacks.
That was in Pennsylvania, right?
Pennsylvania.
The Cash for Kids scandal, right. So I mean, it's just a question of sort of for the criminal justice system, do we want to sort of attach this business profit motive to the system when essentially profits in this business rely on kind of volume? Essentially a company is paid a certain amount by the state per child or per inmate that's there. It's called per diem. This is bed counts. This is like how the business sort of works. This company that I wrote about is not a publicly traded company, but there are two publicly traded private prison companies. And you listen to sort of the earnings calls with investors, and most of the questions are around basically bed counts, occupancy rates of these facilities. Basically how much revenue are you able to squeeze out of kind of the capacity that you have, and you always want to be signing new contracts. You always want to be getting the best deal you possibly can on the inmates. But I think the question is, how much maneuvering room is there really in a prison system?
Right.
And in terms of the costs. And so, it's a pretty low margin business. I mean, it's an expensive part of a lot of states' budgets, and it costs a lot of money to sort of have constant supervision over inmates. But the quality of services is a big question, and I think it's a big question of whether the same services can really be provided, and is there also room for profit?
Well, I mean, and if the issue is, the number of beds being filled and whatnot having a direct impact on profit, then it becomes an incentive for these private prisons to keep those beds full. So I can imagine that there are probably cases of inmates being brought up on charges inside of these private prisons only to be forced to stay even longer than perhaps their original incarceration was.
I mean that does become a question. I mean, in the story that I wrote about at one of the facilities in Florida, the company, a state audit had found that the company was actually keeping children longer than their sentences in order to collect more revenue from the state.
It's absolutely, I'll tell you, it's sick, and thankfully we've got reporters like you, Chris Kirkham, business reporter with Huffington Post. Folks should continue to follow your series on the private prison industry. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, I want to give special thanks to Peter and Rachel and Troy for helping us out at controls. Be sure to check out our website, takeactionnews.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit us on iTunes to get our podcast. For all of us here at Take Action News, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week with another great show. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Go hungry in the streets of the richest nation on earth. It is simply un-American to break those promises now, and our lawmakers must know that we won't stand for it. In Screwed News, fossil fuels aren't just threatening our environment, they pose a major risk to our economy as well. According to former Vice President Al Gore and his longtime business partner David Blood, companies and wealthy individuals must stop investing in oil and gas. They say it's not just a moral issue, but actually a financial one. The so-called carbon bubble has been inflated because investments in toxic fuel sources are far larger than possible returns. But the fossil fuel industry has denied this fact, just like they deny climate change. As oil and gas becomes more expensive and more difficult to extract, the carbon bubble could burst and create a worldwide financial crisis. Vice President Gore and many other experts are calling on companies to divest from fossil fuels before it's too late. Even Bill McKibben at 350.org said, "The carbon bubble that looms over our world needs to be deflated soon. As with our fiscal crisis, failure to do so will cause enormous pain, in fact, almost beyond imagining." In the best of the rest of the news, this week, the Nuclear Information and Resource Service delivered a petition to the U.S. Senate signed by more than 42,000 people. The environmental group collected signatures in opposition to a little-known bill called Senate Bill 1240, which activists have nicknamed the Mobile Chernobyl Bill. And that's the way it is. Today, Friday, November 1st, 2013. I'm Tom Hartman on the news.
What a show the goofily fanatical Tea Party Republicans are putting on in Washington. First, they threw a group hissy fit to force a costly, embarrassing, and entirely unwarranted shutdown of the national government of our U.S. of A. That was strange enough, but then a gaggle of the goofballs cranked their shtick all the way up to Code Red bizarre by throwing a series of staged tantrums when they learned that the government they had shut down was, in fact, shut down. I know you don't have to be smart or logical to be in Congress, but surely a lawmaker ought to be more tightly wrapped than this bunch. One thing that really worked them into a shrieking frenzy was that national parks and monuments were closed. This led to the spectacle of a House committee hauling in the director of national parks to berate him mercilessly for 5 hours, demanding to know why the parks were closed. He should have just held up a mirror, but, like the good career park ranger he is, Director John Jarvis patiently tried to explain the obvious to the Congress critters in front of him. They had voted to shutter the federal government. National parks are part of the government. Congress took away the money to staff the nation's 401 parks and monuments, so they were closed. But the rabid Solons effectively shouted at him, "Stop making sense!" One doofus named Doc Hastings even invented his own facts, blathering that in the government shutdown back in the mid-90s, parks stayed open. Sorry, Doc, but no, the Lincoln Memorial, Statue of Liberty, Grand Canyon, and others all across the country were closed. That's what it means to shut down the government. This is Jim Hightower saying, by the way, guess who has been steadily whacking funding for Park Service staff and maintenance of those national treasures? Right, the same Looney Tune ideologues running today's absurd circus in Washington.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month